Recording starts. Welcome to this week's Cardinal podcast here on stlsportspage.com. Rob Rains with you, is joined again by Mike Rains as we talk to you from our spring training headquarters studio here at the Homewood Suites Hotel, Palm Beach Gardens. And Mike will be on hand here very shortly, too, as we get full bore into spring training. Mike, good afternoon. How are you?
Good. Yeah, one of us has the better view here for this show to start with. So
I got the palm trees out my window. Although I do in
St. Louis.
I do believe that your high temperature in St. Louis on Wednesday is projected to be 72 degrees will be higher than the temperature in Jupiter, Florida on Wednesday. We've been cold. It's been cold and windy, but the sun at least has been out the last couple of days. The forecast is for bright sunny skies for the next few days. So it will be getting warmer and spring training games will be underway and all will be right with the world.
We're heating up in the right direction. First full squad workout underway, and we're trending in the exciting direction of getting closer to opening day here.
Yeah, just a couple of days away now from from games getting started on Saturday. And unusual scheduling. I don't think I've ever seen this in 40 plus years of covering baseball, covering spring training. The Cardinals are going to open spring training with a pair of split squad games, and they're both taking place at the same time. They'll host the Marlins in Jupiter, and then another half of the squad will be taking on the Mets up in Port St. Lucie. So it's a kind of an odd start to the schedule, but with all the 60-something players that you have in camp, they certainly have enough players to do that.
Definitely. And for the folks that are back home, the first game on Saturday, the home game is on Valley Sports Midwest, so you can still check out all the action and see what's going on.
And speaking of that, before we go any farther, we should, even though he's probably not watching, congratulate Chris Carey, who's Chip Carey's son, on getting the Oakland A's TV play-by-play job after his a couple of years of working in the minor leagues down in Amarillo, Texas last year, working with his twin brother, Stefan. So congratulations to Chris. I know he's going to do a good job, and I know Chip is very, very proud of him and as well as Stefan, and for the ability that they've shown as baseball broadcasters. So be interesting to hear him calling the Oakland A's games. Oh, the good thing about West Coast baseball is after the Cardinal games are over, you always can get home in time to turn on the last few innings of a West Coast game. So we'll be doing that for sure to check out how Chris is doing.
The Carey family is creating their dynasty, following after the Buck footsteps, right? So,
well, they're all pretty close. Yeah, I don't think there's 4 generations of Bucks broadcasting Major League Baseball, but this will be.
No, I wouldn't think so.
I think you have to have that going on for them. So anyway. We mentioned the split squad games on Saturday, and I'm sure everybody probably knows by now, but the 2 starting pitchers for those games are going to be Zach Thompson and Matthew Libator. Ali Marmol said Wednesday morning that he's not decided yet which pitcher is going to pitch in which location, but doesn't really matter. And of course, they'll probably be limited to 3 innings or so for that game. But it's interesting because and we knew this from the beginning of the spring training camp that both those guys were being on a starter schedule to get enough innings in to be ready to start, even though it looks like there's a good chance that at least one of them will be in the bullpen when the regular season begins. But I think the interesting thing about having both of them start at this point in the spring is that there has been at least some consideration that the Cardinals have admitted to opening the season with a 6-man rotation. Now, I don't think that's going to last. I think it's just because of the scheduling quirks that starts the season. They don't have an off day until after they played 7 or 8 games, actually 7 games on the West Coast where the weather's usually great, so you don't need a schedule an off day. 4 games in Los Angeles to open the season, 3 games in San Diego, and then you'll have the home opener against the Marlins before you have an off day. So adding that 6th starter for that week does seem to make a lot of sense.
And I'm not convinced that, Steven Matz has solidified that 5th spot to begin with yet either, right? He looked pretty good in the bullpen last year. So, the competition from Libator and Thompson both, you could find them both end up in that 5 and 6 spot, and Matz in the bullpen or one or the other. But, I think there's a case for any one of those guys to be considered a starter, right? Matz had times last year where he was better in the bullpen, and he had times where he was better as a starter. So, be interesting to see how they progress this spring.
Correct, they will, and all of them will get a chance to start. I think probably, to me, that the situation to watch is whoever actually gets that 6 starter spots or makes that spot start during that first week of the season. Odds are, as soon as that starts over, he's probably going back to Memphis, where he'll be in the rotation there, whether it is Thompson or Libator, to be, a backup starter that whenever you need that spot starter in the big leagues, he'll be stretched out and ready to go. And I really do think, you look at Romero probably being the one left-hander in the bullpen who's probably going into the camps and the competition with that spot pretty much secured, unless something, you never know what's going to happen. but I think they will need at least a second left-hander in that bullpen. So that's probably one of 3 jobs. I mean, I know that we've talked about it before, but really the spirited competition in this camp is going to be for those bullpen jobs. You look at maybe 5 guys that you would think right now have a spot, barring injuries or just a terrible spring. It's Helsley, Gallegos, the 2 of the newcomers, Middleton and Kittredge, and then JoJo Romero as the lefty in the group. So you think that those 5 are secure, then you're looking at 3 guys to compete for all those other spots. So that's going to be really fun to watch once these games begin. And I know you can overreact to a single spring training performance, and just because the guy gave up a couple of hits or gave up a run or walked a couple of guys, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end of the line for him as far as getting a job is concerned or winning a big league job. But every performance matters, and it's going to be an evaluation of how all these guys are pitching and how they're performing.
And I think as you look at the bullpen too, from a traditional standpoint, you would think you want a lefty arm against a lefty hitter, right? But in the case of somebody like Andre Palante, who's a very reverse splits type of pitcher, they use him against a lot of lefties, right? So I think that takes the balance off of, do you need another lefty in the bullpen? I agree you probably do, but with Romero and with Palante, you've got a couple options. So then it opens up the, Libator or Thompson or Matz to be the other.
Correct. And I think the other thing is that, and we all know this too, is the bullpen is going to be a work in progress as the season begins. The 8 pitchers who are out there on opening day, even that first week of the season, they're not necessarily going to be the same 8 guys over the course of the season. But I think as they put that bullpen together for the start of the season, the other thing I think that will go into consideration of who wins those 3 kind of open jobs is the fact that you probably don't expect your starters to go more than 5 or maybe 6 innings, depending on how their pitch count is through that first turn or 2 through the rotation, because of just the fact they haven't got their arms built up all the way. And it will help that you're opening on the West Coast because the weather should be good. But I think that they're going to carry an extra guy maybe who can give them 2 or 3 innings in relief if they need it on one or two of those starts.
And as we work through the season and as guys get their arms ready to go and as they move up, this was the struggle last year is Ollie constantly said we're relying on our bullpen to throw too many innings. And so they need the starters to go 6 and 7 innings so that the bullpen doesn't have to work as much as they did last year, right? And so you're banking on, 3 new guys that traditionally have pitched a lot of innings, right? Gray, Lynn, and Gibson. And so hopefully that can happen. And hopefully Ollie can stick with them the 3rd time through the lineup and let them do that, right? Let them work through and let the bullpen rest.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to overreact, or we will, because that's our nature, and that's what baseball fans do in general, and media as well, to what happens in those first 7 or 8 games as far as the number of innings the starter is pitching, how the bullpen is actually used, because I think that's going to all shake down, and maybe by the end of April we'll have a better read on how exactly things are going to progress.
And when we look at last year, we came out to a really bad start, right? And we just never were able to get out of that hole. And I think this year is going to be a little bit different because those first 7 games are going to be really tough against really tough opponents. So we can't overreact in those 7 games right away and say, well, this isn't a great start. Now, obviously, I'm not saying they may come out and play great. I don't know. It just kind of depends on how some of these guys get ready to go in camp. But
well, and the other thing, it goes beyond just those 7 games. I mean, you come home and play the Marlins, then you got series against Arizona, against Philadelphia. I mean, you're playing. I think you only have 1 series in the first 3 weeks of the season, and that's against Oakland. That is against a team that didn't make the playoffs last year, so that's or come close to the playoffs like San Diego. So I mean, I think there's, you can be, if the Cardinals can get through April at 500, I think that's a good start to the season.
I think so too. And you look at last year's team as you compare it to this year with what was last year, a negative 110 run differential, basically, right? And so not only do you need your bullpen to not give up as many runs and starters not to give up as many runs, but the offense has to wake up. You're looking in 2 guys in Goldie and Arenado that really didn't play like they should have last year to help the rest of this team out.
Correct. And I think there's going to be a lot of focus on those guys and what kind of starts they get off to, because they're veteran players, even in slow April. And I know traditionally sometimes the guys do start slow during the regular season, especially, making the adjustment to the cooler weather. But, I think how those 2 guys play in April is going to be a factor and be important to this team's success. The other guy.
I was
Go
going to say,
ahead.
as we look to some of those guys, we look at the young guys and we look at some of the other guys that they've pegged to be veterans this year. Brendan Donovan.
Right. I had a couple things I wanted to share about Donovan. I had an interesting conversation with him today because I have a little issue with a pain in my arm. And I went up to him and I said, hey, I just want to know where exactly did you have that pain in your arm last year? Trying to compare it to say, I wonder if that's something that I'm dealing with, a muscle cramp kind of thing. And he goes, no. He goes, it wasn't my tendon. It was my elbow. Because I had a torn ligament in my elbow. And I was like, how'd that get misreported or whatever? He goes, I don't know. He goes, it really kind of made me mad that people were saying it was a torn flexor because it wasn't. It was a torn ligament in his elbow. But he claims he's 100% fully recovered. He's been taking batting practice, been fielding drills. So I suspect you're going to see him in the lineup at second base in one of those two games on Saturday. So that's good news. I think he is 100% ready to go.
That seems like a big miss to misdiagnose that kind of.
I don't know that it was a misdiagnosis. I think it may have just been misreported for whatever reason. Somehow it got reported that it was a flexor tendon injury instead of the elbow, instead of the ligament. But I can't say that it was misdiagnosed because as far as I know, that wasn't. As far as I know, the surgery was correct and that fixed the problem. But I think it was, for some reason, it was reported incorrectly. So
I think he's going to be a really big key piece to this lineup, right? Because there's so many different positions he can play, so many different spots he can play, and offer you a good bat, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to work him into the lineup. So I think we're expecting a big season out of Donovan this year.
And I also think he's one of those kind of guys, even though he's a younger player, even though he's a less experienced player than some of those guys, the way he plays, as hard as he plays, and not being afraid to kind of stick his nose in some places, I think he's going to be become more vocal too. And he couldn't really do that a year ago when he wasn't playing. And I think he's going to kind of become a real emerging leader on this team. Maybe not completely all the way this year as he will be in the coming years, but I don't think there's any way to quantify how much the Cardinals really missed him a year ago. I mean, I know he was playing, but he was playing hurt, and I just don't think that they really got the benefit of how much Brendan Donovan can bring to this club. And I think by the same token, when he's playing and playing healthy and playing second base, what does that do? It frees up Nolan Gorman to be your primary DH, which in turn should hopefully kind of prevent maybe some of the back issues that have bothered him. And he made a lot of changes this offseason as far as his diet, his nutrition, his workout load. So he's prepared, think to be able to get through that and not have the same problems with his back that he had a year ago. But I think maybe limiting the amount of time he's playing second base, getting more duty as DH will help that as well.
I think and as you look at the team last year, there was a lot of pressure put on these young guys because the veterans weren't coming through. And so we needed someone to step up and be the guy. And, that's what put a lot of pressure on Jordan Walker, put a lot of pressure on Nolan Gorman. And so this year, if Goldie and Arenado can do what they're supposed to do, and Donovan can get back to that veteran leader and be healthy and do what he's supposed to do, I think there's going to be a big, I don't want to say stress relief, but just a weight off the shoulders of Gorman and Walker to know that, hey, I can just relax and play my game, and that's actually going to probably help them play better in the long run.
We do have a word of warning about something that happened this week at spring training, that if you're coming down to Florida, going to be parking on the Central Avenue side of the facility and behind those back fields where the Cardinals often take batting practice before games, even after the games start. Be a little be forewarned that you could have a problem with your windshield, because Lars Nootbaar launched a home run on Tuesday that broke a back window of a car parked out in that parking lot. So it was quite a shock to everybody. I asked Lars this morning about it. He said he'd never broken a car window before, even in Little League. So it was a big moment. I said, well, did he at least get the baseball? And he goes, yeah, I hope so. And it turns out that we found out this morning too that in addition to that window being broken on another field, the Cardinals taking batting practice, somebody, and I don't know who the hitter was, hit the home run, and the ball just happened to hit the rearview mirror correctly and knock that mirror off the car. So danger zone out in the parking lot behind the outfield. Maybe that's a sign that the Cardinals are going to hit a lot of home runs this year. I don't know.
I was going to say, you don't like to see the windows being broken or cars being damaged, but on the flip side, I like seeing the offense ready to go, and we like seeing the home runs, right?
Yeah, Lars did say. Go ahead. Yeah.
I just said it's the argument of, a lot of times we've seen this Cardinal team live and die by the home runs, and they're just not coming through. But maybe if they're starting to fall and click a little bit better, and Nootbaar's talked about working with Arenado to develop his swing a little bit more, and if he can add a little bit more pop in his game, I mean, look out, because there's a lot of guys across this board that can hit 20, 25 home runs right now.
He did say, I think they've got a sign out there that says "park at your own risk." So I think hopefully, and I said, well, hopefully a guy got the baseball, and he goes, well, I hope he at least got the baseball. That
for sure.
clean up all that broken glass in that windshield. So the other thing I've noticed, which it doesn't affect a player who's we have to think about making the club, I think, out of spring training, but I've really been impressed by how Tink Hens looks so far this spring, with the fact that he's picked up about, you just walking across the clubhouse, I saw him and I said, have you gained weight? And he goes, yeah, I picked up about 8 pounds this winter. He's up to about 190. And you think how skinny a little guy he was when he first got signed, drafted by the Cardinals, a 160-pound guy. I mean, he's picked up a lot of weight, a lot of muscle over these last 3 years that he's been in the organization. So how if that affects his pitching? He said maybe he thinks it'll just make him feel better. Not necessarily going to add velocity because they're already throwing, mid to high 90s anyway. But I think it's going to maybe make him feel a little better. Maybe it'll help in his endurance and his conditioning. They'll let him stay in the games longer, not to come out of the games after 80 or 90 pitches.
Yeah, as a high velocity guy like he is, the muscle at that point can only help to strengthen it, right? To allow him to A, pitch that speed at longer, and B, hopefully strengthen the muscle so that it doesn't get hurt or worn down as easy, right? So then there's less injury and things like that. So hopefully that's a good sign to see from him for the future. And he's still probably a year or so away, but it's good to see him getting exciting and working on that.
The other thing we're going to be paying a lot of attention to as the spring games begin, and we mentioned Donovan, being a full go, he says, from his injury, the surgery he had last August. The other couple of guys on this ball club are coming off minor surgery. One is Dylan Carlson, maybe not even minor surgery, really, Dylan Carlson and Tommy Edman. Edman had the wrist surgery, of course, after the season, in October, and Carlson had the surgery on his ankle, which I think, again, compromised him a lot more than we really know. Last year toward the end of the season in September. But both those guys are still here. They're going through reps of spring training. Carlson was scheduled to run on Wednesday. That was kind of the last box he had to check on base running to make sure he was ready to go. Edmund is going to be limited on throwing for a while, but he'll be able to take some turns as DH and get some at-bats in. But, watching those two guys and seeing how they're progressing on their injury recoveries is going to be something that we pay attention to here as the games get underway too.
A lot of people are saying right now that the outfield is locked up between Nootbaar, Edman, and Walker, but I think we're all pretty excited to see what a healthy Dylan Carlson can do, because a lot of people forget that he's 25 years old, right? So what kind of contest and competition is that going to end up being that people probably aren't realizing, because, Newt became this overnight celebrity in Japan and has played well. We can't say that he hasn't played well, but it wouldn't surprise me if Carlson starts to question some of that, or if Carlson finds a way to get his bat in the lineup from a DH standpoint every now and then, or, you've got some options to work through there between Donovan and Gorman and Edman, kind of maybe being a little bit hurt to start the season. So there are some options, but I think the outfield is going to be an interesting contest to watch too.
Yeah, I think there's enough at bats to go around, but to split them up between 4 outfielders. But I'm like you. I'm really going to be interested to see how healthy Dylan Carlson makes an impact and how he can impact that baseball and be the kind of the prospect that the Cardinals always thought he was when he was 19, 20, 21 years old, and had a really good rookie season too in the COVID year in 2020 and then in 2021, but just kind of slid back a little bit, I think, because of the injuries more than anything else. So he's if you're going to pick a guy for maybe a comeback player this year on the Cardinals, assuming he can get enough at bats to do that, I wouldn't bet against Dylan Carlson.
And I think, as we look at that, you see, it also talks about squaring up the remaining bench spots, right? Because, between Carlson, Donovan, and Herrera, there's your 3 spots. And so I think the other contest to watch this spring is who kind of finishes out there. It's probably kind of locked up between Burleson and Carpenter, you would think right now, but I don't know that that's a lock per se, right? If you were to ask Ollie today.
We have one story up on the website at steelsportspage.com earlier this week about the 10 players that I picked out as far as guys to watch this spring, and most of the guys you just named are on that list. That kind of how they perform, and even Carpenter, even because we think he's going to have a spot on this club, and they've talked about how they really want him to kind of be a mentor to some of the younger players, younger hitters, Wynn, Walker, Gorman, Donovan, those kind of guys. He's still got to be able to come out there and perform. I mean, he's going to be a part-time first baseman. He's going to be a part-time DH. He's going to be able to be a bat off the bench. And even if he's taking a spot that maybe would go to a backup infielder who wouldn't play a whole lot, I mean, the 26-man roster gives you that chance to carry that extra player, but they're still going to need him to be able to do something and be productive to justify having that spot. And
I don't mean this to sound rude in any context of the matter, but Alec Burleson is the same player, the same position, the same spot, and maybe with a little bit more pop and maybe a little bit more on base percentage, right? So the question is going to come down to do they carry two of the same type of player?
Yeah, it'll be interesting
because you want Carpenter's veteran presence there.
Speaking of all the players in camp, we've got a story that's going to should be posted on Thursday on the site about one of the pitching candidates who's probably not going to make the ball club, but is fighting for a spot probably in AAA. And that's a guy named Logan Sawyer. Now, if you don't know his story and are familiar with his backstory, I really encourage you to watch for that story on Thursday and read it, because it's an interesting story. And I think everybody in the big league camp has a story to tell of how they got here, but I don't think anybody in that camp can match the story that Logan Sawyer has about how he got to this spring training camp. So look for that story coming up on Thursday, as well as, of course, all of our continuing spring training coverage. When games get underway on Saturday, we will have our usual postcard from camp that will have all the details of what happened in the game, what else is going on off the field in the clubhouse, roster moves, things like that, injury reports, as well as what we've done the last couple of years, the Jupiter Minute, which gives you a 1-minute little video recap of what happened in the game and what's going on in Cardinals camp. So all those will be regular features on the website when the first game gets going on Saturday.
I think we're excited to see what happens here, right?
I'm ready to go. I'm ready to watch some real baseball. So we'll watch guys throw pitch and catch. You got guys throwing batting practice and fielding practice and running drills and all that kind of stuff. But I'm ready to see some real baseball. So that gets started on Saturday. So Mike, thanks again for your time. We'll see you again next week, and we'll see you here in Florida very soon. So for Mike Raines, this is Rob Raines, STLSportsPage.com. Thanks for watching this week's Cardinal Podcast. Raines on the Cardinals.